Welcome back to Sleeping Historian, your cozy corner for calming bedtime history. Tonight, we're stepping quietly into the 1700s to discover how ordinary people, farmers, bakers, blacksmiths, weavers, sailors, and traveling merchants earned their living. These soothing, everyday stories of seasonal farming, guild crafts, apprenticeships, and barter systems will gently guide you toward rest. If you love peaceful, slow-paced history that helps you drift off, tap subscribe and the notification bell so you'll never miss another sleepy journey through the past. Picture this: a small village, somewhere in Europe, sometime around the year 1700. It's nighttime. Most folks are already asleep, curled under scratchy wool blankets, the kind that always smell faintly of smoke from the hearth. Out on the cobblestone street, a lonely lantern flickers on a wooden post, making a little circle of amber light in the dark. A church bell in the distance just rang 9 late enough that even the village cat has stopped prowling for mice. You and I are the only ones still awake. We're standing by the wooden village gate, which, if we're honest, is more like a squeaky fence door than a mighty castle entrance. The air is cool and carries the smell of damp earth and bread that was baked earlier in the evening. A sleepy breeze stirs the trees. Somewhere close by, a cow says a long, low breath, as if it too is settling in for the night. Tonight we're slipping quietly into the 1700s, not to meet kings, but to watch battles, but to see what the ordinary folks were doing. How did they make their daily bread? How did they earn a living without stock markets, smartphones, or Wi-Fi to complain about when it went down? This isn't the dramatic kind of history that makes headlines. This is the kind of history that hums in the background, the gentle, repetitive work that kept families fed and villages running. As we start our walk, you might hear a faint clatter maybe, a loose shutter tapping against a wall, or the soft snore of someone who spent the whole day threshing grain. Life here is slow. Even the stars seem to hang a little heavier in the sky. Let's take a slow step forward. The gate creaks loud enough that if anyone were awake, they might frown at the noise, but no one stirs. Our boots scuff lightly against the cobblestones as we move toward the town square. In the square, there is a well in the center, a simple stone circle with a wooden bucket hanging from a rope. Tomorrow morning, before the sun even thinks about rising, the baker will be here to draw water. He'll knead his dough in the dark while the rest of the village is dreaming. Farmers will trudge past, half awake, heading to the fields with plows and oxen. The blacksmith will yawn, rub his eyes, and start a fire that will roar to life by mid-morning. But tonight the square is still. Even the fountain has stopped dripping, as if holding its breath for the night. Let's pause here for a moment. Take a breath. This quiet is exactly why we're here, to slow down, to listen to the small things that usually get lost in the noise of big history. Over there, tucked against the edge of the square, is the bakery, a low stone building with a heavy wooden door. The smell of bread lingers even now, like a promise of tomorrow's breakfast. Next to it is the blacksmith shop, its tools hanging on the wall like silent guards. Across from them, the weaver's cottage rests under a sagging thatched roof. Each place has its own story, its own rhythm. Together, they make a web of work that keeps this little world turning. You might be thinking this is kind of boring, and that's the point. There's a strange comfort in the boring parts of history. No sword fights, no royal plots, just people doing their jobs over and over again. And in a world where so much feels uncertain, that steady rhythm feels like a lullaby. Now, imagine the people who will wake up here tomorrow. The farmer's hands are rough and calloused, cracked from frost and soil. He'll pull on worn boots, maybe mutter about the weather, and head to the barn. The baker, already awake, will stretch his back, wipe flour from his cheek, hum a simple tune as he slides loaves into a hot oven. The blacksmith will swing his hammer in a steady beat that echoes through the village, while a curious child peeks through the doorway, dreaming of someday making sparks fly too. Further down the lane, a sailor's wife mends a shirt by candlelight. Her husband weeks away on a merchant ship. She folds the fabric carefully, thinking of him under a wide ocean sky. A weaver finishes a bolt of cloth, the shuttle of her loom whispering back and forth like a heartbeat. These are the moments history books rarely bother with, but they're the moments that filled most of human life. Let's step closer to the blacksmith's shop. Even in darkness, you can almost feel the day's heat lingering in the anvil and tools. A faint smell of iron and ash clings to the doorway. If you close your eyes, you might hear the echo of his hammer, the rhythmic ring that guided so many days. Walking past the bakery again, you can almost taste tomorrow's bread. It will be simple, dense, maybe a little chewy, but it's the kind of bread that makes a hard day feel less hard. That bread, that hammering, that weaving, they're all part of a quiet world that was, for many, the only world they knew. The village is more than its trades, of course. It's a network of small favors, of borrowed tools and shared meals. If a farmer's plow broke, the blacksmith would fix it without question, knowing that someday he might need a bushel of grain in return. The baker might trade bread for wool from the weaver, who might barter cloth for a sailor's story. Money exists, yes, but trust and barter run deeper here. As we stand in the square looking at the sleeping houses, it's easy to imagine that this village could be anywhere: France, England, Germany, or even colonial America. The accents might change, the crops might shift. The core, the steady work, the humble routines remains the same. Take one last look around. The lantern on the post flickers, then steadies. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. The night air is crisp but gentle, like a soft blanket pulled up to your chin. The village sleeps on, unaware that centuries from now, people will be curious about its quiet ways. Tonight, you not an outsider, you just another wanderer pausing in the calm of a world long gone. The gates behind us creak again as a breeze passes through, but no one wakes. We'll walk among these people as they work, seeing how they earn their bread and their place in this little corner of history. For now, let's take a deep breath and let the night hold us still. The story of ordinary work is about to begin. The first light of dawn creeps over the horizon, and the village stirs before the sun even fully wakes. Out on the edge of town, a farm sits wrapped in mist. The fields are a dull green-gray under the morning haze, and the world feels half asleep. A lone rooster, proud of himself, as roosters tend to buy, lets out another call, just in case anyone missed the first one. The farmer, a man with calloused hands and stiff shoulders, pulls on his worn boots. The leather creaks a little. His boots have seen every kind of weather, mud, frost, and the dust of harvest. He yawns, scratches his beard, and steps outside. The air bites his cheeks with a chill, but there's a kind of comfort in it. This is his routine. Behind him, a sleepy cow moos softly, like it's complaining about the early hour. A couple of chickens cluck from their coop, fluttering their feathers but not really moving yet. The farm is alive, but it hasn't stretched its limbs. The farmer grabs a wooden bucket and walks toward the well. The ground crunches faintly under his boots. The bucket dips into the dark water, sending small ripples out into the stillness. He pulls it up, muscles straining just a little, and pours it into a trough for the animals. The sound of water splashing is loud in the quiet morning. His wife, already awake, tends the small kitchen fire. She stirs a pot of thin porridge, its steam rising like a little ghost. Breakfast will be quick and simple. A few bites to keep them moving through the day. Their isn't much conversation. Both are still shaking off sleep, but there is an unspoken partnership between them. She knows he'll need his strength for the fields. He knows she'll have endless chores waiting, milking cows, mending clothes, maybe spinning wool when she has a moment. Out in the fields, the tools wait where he left them yesterday. A wooden plow leans against a fence post. The soil smells damp and rich. Farming in the 1700s isn't glamorous. There's no shiny tractor waiting, no bags of fertilizer lined up neatly. There's just muscle, weather, and hope. He starts with the oxen. The beasts, big and steady, snort warm clouds into the cold air. He pats their sides, tightens the harnesses, and whispers a few quiet words, maybe encouragement, maybe habit. The first furrow of the day is always the hardest. The wooden plow bites into the earth, and the oxen pull slow and sure. The soil turns in neat lines, and with every step, the world feels a little more awake. Birdsong starts faintly in the trees, tentative at first, then braver. The sun edges higher, smearing soft gold across the horizon. Dew glints on the grass, and a light breeze lifts the smell of tilled earth. This rhythm, plow, step, breathes the heartbeat of farming. It's not exciting, not the stuff of legends, but it's steady. And in a century without supermarkets or grocery delivery, this work means survival. As the morning stretches on, the farmer stops to drink from a leather flask. His back aches already, but he keeps going. The planting season doesn't wait. In summer, he'll be weeding. In autumn, harvesting. Winter will bring repairs. Mending fences, sharpening tools, patching boots. Every season has its tasks, and the tasks have their own quiet music. His children's maul, and still rubbing sleep from their eyes, wander out to help. One carries a basket of seeds, careful not to spill. Another chases a runaway chicken, giggling even as their mother calls them back to their chores. Farming is a family effort, even for little hands. In the far distance, you can hear another farmer's oxen. It's a faint, slow sound, wooden wheels squeaking, a man calling gently to his team. The fields stretch out, dotted with tiny figures bent to their work. By mid-morning, the sun is higher and the mist has burned away. The farm is fully alive now. The smell of earth and hay mixes with the faint scent of smoke from the kitchen chimney. A neighbor passes by on the road, leading a donkey loaded with sacks of grain. He lifts a hand in greeting, no words, just a small gesture that says, "We're in this together." The farmer takes a moment to lean on his plow and gaze over the fields. There's satisfaction in seeing the neat rows he's carved into the earth. It's not pride, not exactly, more like reassurance. These rows mean food for winter, bread for the table, maybe even enough surplus to trade at the market for a new iron tool. Lunch is simple. A chunk of yesterday's bread, a piece of hard cheese, maybe an apple. 8 sitting on an overturned bucket, watching the sky for signs of weather. The 1700s, the weather is everything. Once too much rain, and the crops drown. Too little, and they wither. Farmers live with one eye on the clouds, always half prepared for disappointment. But today the sky is kind. Blue stretches wide and soft, dotted with lazy clouds. The air is neither too hot nor too cold. It's a good day for work. The afternoon brings more plowing, more planting, more steady steps. Sometimes the farmer hums a simple tune, something his father taught him, or maybe just a melody that came to him after too many long days in the sun. The oxen's slow breaths and the creak of the plow join in, making a kind of farmyard symphony. As evening approaches, the light softens to amber again. The farmer unharnesses the oxen and gives them a pat before leading them back to the barn. The animals chew hay contentedly. Fields, now lined neatly with planted seeds, glow faintly under the setting sun. Back at the farmhouse, the smell of stew greets him. His wife has set the table with chipped wooden bowls. The children chatter about little things: a bird they saw, a funny-shaped rock they found. The farmer doesn't say much. He's tired in that bone-deep way that only a day of hard work can bring, but it's a good kind of tired. When the last light fades and the first stars blink awake, the farm falls quiet again. Tomorrow will be the same, another dawn, another day of steady labor. But for now, the fields rest, the oxen sleep, and the family curls under their blankets. In the grand sweep of history, nobody wrote their names in a book, but their work silent, repetitive, essential built the world we live in now. The village is still wrapped in darkness when the baker wakes. It's hours before sunrise, and the stars are the only lamps above the thatched roofs. His small cottage smells faintly of yesterday's bread, nutty, warm, and comforting, even as the embers in his hearth have cooled overnight. He rubs his eyes, yawns, and pulls on a linen shirt dusted with flour stains that never really wash out. His boots make a soft thump on the packed earth floor. As he moves toward the bakery, a squat stone building with a heavy wooden door. Outside, the night is so still that even his quiet footsteps seem loud. Inside, the bakery feels both empty and alive. The tools of his trade: wooden paddles, mixing bowls, sacks of coarse flour wait patiently like old friends. He stirs the dying fire in the oven until a few glowing embers wake up. Then he feeds it new wood, coaxing the flames to life. The smell of burning oak fills the room, rich and slightly sweet. Next comes the dough. The baker pours water from the well into a wide wooden trough. He tips in the flour, a little salt, and a small lump of yesterday's dough to start the rise. His hands, rough and broad, move slowly but surely, folding, pressing, stretching. The sound of kneading is soft and rhythmic. Push, pull, turn. The dough sticks a little, then gives way, warming under his palms. There's something almost meditative about it. He's done this so many times that his mind can wander. Maybe he thinks about the weather and how it will affect the farmer's grain harvest. Maybe he hums an old tune, the kind his grandmother used to sing when she baked on Sundays. Or maybe he thinks about nothing at all, letting the simple act of bread making carry him forward. The first loaves are shaped and set aside to rise. Outside, the village is silent. Even the rooster hasn't thought about crowing yet. The baker steps to the doorway for a moment and breathes in the night air. There's a chill that bites the nose, but he's used to it. He watches his breath curl in the darkness, then steps back inside to tend the fire. As the oven heats, the bakery begins to glow with a faint orange light. The shadows of bowls and paddles stretch long against the walls. The baker moves quietly, sweeping stray flour from the counter. This little room will soon be the heart of the village's morning. But for now, it's a lonely place, echoing only with the crackle of fire and the soft sigh of rising dough. One by one, he slides the shaped loaves onto a wooden peel and then into the oven. The smell starts to change first, just warm air, then the unmistakable scent of bread baking. It's a smell that has comforted people for centuries. A smell that says, "You are fed, you are cared for." The baker sits for a moment on a low stool, wiping sweat from his brow. His workday began before most even stirred, and it will end long after the last loaf is sold or traded. Bread isn't a luxury here, it's life itself. Families will stretch it to make meals last, dipping crusts into thin stew or pairing it with a sliver of cheese. Outside, a faint pink line appears on the horizon. The village roosters finally find their courage. One crows, then another, until it sounds like a sleepy orchestra tuning up for the day. Windows creak open, a dog barks once, then goes quiet. Life is beginning to stir. The baker opens the oven door, and a rush of warm air escapes. The loaves are golden now, their crusts cracked just so. He taps one gently. It makes a hollow sound, perfect. Sets them on a wooden rack and the smell intensifies, filling the bakery until it feels like the walls themselves are made of bread. Soon the first customers arrive. A farmer already on his way to the fields ducks in to grab a loaf. He trades a few eggs instead of coins. Barter still runs strong here. The baker nods in thanks, adding the eggs to a small basket on the counter. A young girl comes next, clutching a small purse of coppers. She shyly places them on the table, and the baker gives her a loaf that's still steaming, wrapping it in a bit of cloth. Her eyes widen at the warmth in her hands. The bakery grows busier as the sun rises. The blacksmith's apprentice stops by, cheeks pink from the cold, to fetch bread for his master. A sailor's wife comes for 2 loaves, one for today and one to pack in her husband's bundle when he departs. There's chatter now, gentle and unhurried. Someone comments on the weather. Someone else mentions the coming fair. It's all small talk, but it's the kind that binds a community. By mid-morning, most of the bread is gone. The bakery is quieter again, the air still warm from the fire. The baker leans against the counter for a moment, stretching his back. He knows he'll have to sweep the floor, prepare for tomorrow, maybe even help his wife mend a broken shelf at home. But for now, he allows himself a small moment of pride. The village is fed, and he played his part. As the day moves on, crumbs on the counter are swept away. The wooden paddle is set back on its hook. The baker steps outside into the brightening morning. Children run past with crusts in their hands. A breeze carries the last traces of bread's aroma down the lane. Tonight, when the lanterns are lit and the village settles once again, people will tear into the loaves he made. They'll share stories over bowls of stew, or maybe just eat quietly, thankful for the simple gift of bread. And tomorrow, while the village sleeps, the baker will wake again, ready to repeat the same slow, steady work that's kept this place alive for generations. The village is fully awake now, sunlight spilling over rooftops and warming the cobblestones. Near the edge of the square stands the blacksmith's chapelleau, sturdy building of timber and stone, its roof sagging slightly from years of smoke and weather. The smell here is a mix of iron, ash, and faintly singed wood. Even before you step inside, you can feel the heat seeping out through the cracks in the door. The blacksmith himself is already at work. He's a broad-shouldered man, his arms thick from years of swinging a hammer. His leather apron is stained and worn, the surface shiny in places where sparks have kissed it too many times. He wipes his brow with the back of a sooty hand, leaving a streak across his temple. Inside the smithy, the air is alive with sound and motion. The forge glows a deep orange, and every now and then, a gust of the bellows makes the coals flare bright, casting dancing shadows on the rough wooden beams. Hanging on the walls are tools of every shape: hammers, tongs, chisels, each with its own history. Some were passed down from the smith's father, and maybe even his grandfather before that. In this trade, skills and tools alike are heirlooms. A small apprentice, perhaps 12 years old, stands nearby. His hands are dusty with ash, and his eyes are wide with concentration. He works the bellows carefully, pushing air into the forge with a steady rhythm. The hiss and pop of heating metal fill the room like a slow song. The blacksmith draws a glowing iron rod from the fire with his tongs. It's red hot, almost white at the edges. He lays it on the anvil and raises his hammer. The first strike is a clean, ringing note that echoes through the village. Another follows, and another clang, clang, clang. It's one slightly softer as the metal begins to take shape. Outside, a woman pauses on her way to the market, smiling faintly at the familiar sound. To her, that ringing is as much a part of village life as the church bell or the rooster-esque crow. It means tools are being mended, horses are being shod, life is being kept in order. The blacksmith works methodically. Sparks burst with each strike, tiny stars that flare and die in an instant. The apprentice watches closely, occasionally handing over a different hammer or dipping a finished piece in the water trough. The hiss of steam rises sharply, then fades, leaving a faint metallic temps in the air. Today, the smith is making horseshoes. Tomorrow, it might be a plowshare or a set of nails for a carpenter. Nothing glamorous, but everything essential. In the 1700s, if a plow broke or a wagon wheel splintered, a family's livelihood could be at risk. The blacksmith's steady hands kept those small disasters from becoming tragedies. The forge isn't just a workshop, it's a gathering place. Farmers stop by to check on repairs. Children peek in through the open doorway, hoping to see the sparks. Sometimes on slower days, a neighbor will bring a mug of small beer or a hunk of bread, just to share a moment of conversation. The blacksmith knows everyone's stories: whose cow is calving, whose roof is leaking, who's planning to travel to the next market town. The apprentice takes his turn at the anvil, awkward but eager. His hammer falls a little off-center, but the blacksmith doesn't scold him, just adjusts the piece, offers a quiet word of guidance, and lets the boy try again. This is how skills are passed down, not in books or formal lessons, but in patient, repetitive work, day after day. As the sun climbs higher, the smithy grows hotter. The blacksmith steps outside for a breath of cooler air. He leans against the doorway, arms crossed, and looks toward the fields. He knows his work doesn't end when the tools are fixed. Tomorrow, someone might need a new hinge for a barn door or a stronger chain for a cart. He'll be here, hammer in hand, ready to shape the world one small piece at a time. Back inside, the forge roars again as the apprentice pumps the bellows. Another iron bar goes into the fire, and the dance of sparks begins anew. The blacksmith hums a tune under his breath, low, steady, like the heartbeat of the village itself. Later in the afternoon, a farmer arrives with a wagon wheel hub that cracked under a heavy load. The blacksmith inspects it with a practiced eye, nods once, and sets to work without a fuss. There's no rush, just the surety of a man who's done this 1,000 times. The hammer falls, the iron bends, the shape reforms. Outside, life carries on. Children laughing, hens clucking, distant voices at the market. But here, in this glowing corner of the village, time feels slower, almost sacred. By evening, the forge has cooled a little, and the tools are hung back on their hooks. The apprentice sweeps the floor, sending a small cloud of dust into the warm air. The blacksmith wipes his hands on his apron and pats the boy's shoulder. Silent good work. As they close up for the night, the smithy seems to exhale. The embers fade to a soft red, and the last wisp of smoke curls out through the chimney. Outside, the sky shifts toward dusk. The smell of bread from the bakery drifts on the breeze, mingling with the faint scent of iron. The blacksmith pauses to watch the first stars appear. It's just a few at first, scattered like sparks against the darkening sky. Tomorrow will bring more broken tools, more horseshoes to shape, more steady hammer blows echoing through the village. But tonight, the smithy rests. The forge sleeps. And the village, wrapped in the sound of distant evening chatter, settles back into its gentle rhythm. The sun has slipped a little lower, and golden light spills across the small cottage near the village edge. Its roof sags just enough to look well lived in, and smoke curls lazily from its chimney. Inside, the air is warm and smells faintly of lanolin, the natural scent of wool land. Old wood polished smooth by generations of hands. This is the weaver's world. It's not grand, not noisy, but it hums with quiet purpose. The weaver, a woman with nimble fingers and a keen eye, sits before her loom. The loom itself dominates the small room, wooden beams, smooth and sturdy, holding a taut warp of threads, like a harp waiting to be played. The shuttle is small, boat-shaped piece of wood, carrying the weft threads in her hand. She pushes it through the warp, back and forth, with a practiced rhythm. Swish, tap, swish, tap. Each movement adds another line to the growing cloth, a patient layering of effort and time. The spinning wheel in the corner turns slowly as her daughter spins wool into yarn. The soft whir of the wheel joins the loom's gentle percussion. Outside, a chicken clucks half-heartedly. And somewhere distant, a blacksmith's hammer rings a faint reminder of village life continuing all around. Weaving is slow work. A single bolt of cloth can take days, even weeks, to finish. Each thread is a small promise: warmth for winter, a new tunic for a growing child, or a blanket to barter at the market. The weaver's husband steps quietly through the door, brushing dust from his boots. He glances at the growing cloth with a faint smile. It's the same pattern his grandmother favored. Patterns carry memories here. A certain stripe might remind someone of a wedding day, a certain color of a lost friend. Cloth isn't just practical, it's a quiet archive of village history. The weaver pauses to adjust a thread, her brow furrowed in concentration. She doesn't use patterns on paper. Her memory and hands know what to do. Her shuttle glides again, steady as breathing. Swish tap. The light outside fades a little more, softening the edges of the world. As she works, the room feels timeless. This could be a cottage in England, France, or a colonial settlement in America. The sound of the loom would be the same, the smell of wool the same. Even the tired cat curled on the windowsill would look the same, half watching, half dozing. One she learned from her doozy, one she learned from her grandmother. The melody is simple and a little wistful. The spinning wheel answers with its low hum, and for a moment, the whole room feels like part of an old song, threads of sound and fabric weaving together. Sometimes the weaver trades her work for what the family needs. A few yards of cloth might earn a basket of eggs or a small sack of grain. On rare occasions, someone might request a special pattern, a sailor's wife, wanting a piece of cloth to sew a coat that will remind her husband of home while he's at sea. These trades aren't hurried negotiations, quiet, familiar exchanges built on trust. The weaver's shuttle pauses briefly. She stretches her back, rolling her shoulders. Outside the window, the sky is turning amber and lavender, the kind of colors that make you want to wrap yourself in something warm. She watches the light fade for a moment, then picks up the shuttle again. The rhythm resumes. Swish, tap, swish, tap, swish, tap. If you close your eyes, the sound could almost lull you to sleep, like distant rain on a roof. It's easy to forget, watching her work, how much depends on these steady motions. Without weavers, there would be no warm blankets for winter nights, no sturdy shirts for farmers, no fine ribbons for the market fair. The weaver's younger son toddles into the room, clutching a scrap of leftover cloth. He drags it across the floor like a treasured toy. The cat lifts its head briefly, unimpressed, and returns to its nap. His mother smiles faintly but keeps her hands moving. The work must go on, not urgently, but inevitably. Later, when the day is almost gone, the family will gather around a simple meal. The loom will stand silent, its growing cloth catching the firelight. The spinning wheel will stop its humming. But even in stillness, these tools seem alive, as if holding all the day's quiet labor within their wooden frames. Tomorrow, the weaver will return to her bench. The shuttle will glide again. The same motions, the same sounds, the same patience, threads, crossing, stories building, one quiet line at a time. As the sky darkens, the cottage window glows softly from the fire within. Traveler passing by might glimpse the moving shadow of the weaver at her loom, steady and sure. They might think just for a moment of the unseen hands that clothe the world, hands that never seek glory, only the satisfaction of steady work. The world feels wider now. the village is a memory, shrinking behind the curve of the earth. Ahead lies nothing but rolling blue, the endless Atlantic, or the quiet channel, depending on where you imagine yourself. It is the 1700s, and to earn a living at sea is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because someone has to haul fish, ferry goods, and sail merchant ships. Extraordinary because the sea is always bigger than the men who dare it. A small merchant vessel rocks gently, its sails billowed by a steady breeze. The deck smells of salt, tar, and damp rope scent that sticks to clothes and lingers in hair long after the voyage ends. Sailors move with an easy, practiced rhythm, balancing instinctively as the ship sways. To them, the shifting deck is as natural as a village street. Near the bow, a young sailor coils a rope. His hands are rough, nicked from hard work, but his movements are sure. This is his third voyage, and already the ocean feels like home. He hums a tune, something his mother sang when he was a boy. It's half a lullaby, half a sea shanty, and the wind seems to carry the notes farther than the eye can see. The captain, an older man with a weathered face, stands near the helm. His coat is faded from sun and salt, its brass buttons dulled by years of storms. He doesn't speak much, but his eyes scan the horizon with quiet vigilance. Out here, a good captain doesn't need to shout. His crew knows what to do, and the sea does not reward noise. Below deck, the hold is packed with barrels salted fish, dried beans, maybe a few casks of ale. These goods will be traded at the next port, fueling economies far from the sleepy villages they left behind. Trade is the heartbeat of this century, and ships like this are its arteries. Life at sea isn't glamorous. Meals are simple. Hard-tacked biscuits that crumble like chalk, dried meat that fights your teeth, and water that turns brackish after a few weeks. But there's a kind of contentment in routine. At night, the crew gathers under the stars, sharing stories, some true, most exaggerated. They laugh quietly, careful not to wake those below deck. The ocean's hush fills the spaces between words. Far off, a pod of dolphins surfaces, their sleek bodies catching the last light of the sun. For a moment, even the sailors pause. The sight is a gift, a reminder that the sea has its own secret life. Storms are a part of the deal. Sudden squall can turn calm seas into a heaving monster. But tonight, the waters are merciful. The sails snap softly, and the ship glides forward, its wake a pale ribbon in the moonlight. The young sailor leans on the railing, staring out at the horizon. He wonders what his family is doing back home. Maybe his father's mending a fence, or his sister is carding wool by the hearth. The thought is comforting, like a thread connecting to worlds. Morning comes slowly at sea. The horizon brightens, turning from black to deep indigo, then to soft pink. The gulls return, their cries sharp, but somehow cheerful. The crew stirs, rubbing sleep from their eyes, ready to repeat the day's small labors, tightening ropes, mending sails, checking the compass. A seasoned sailor tells a new boy about ports he's seen: Lisbon, Havana, maybe even far-off Calcutta. His words are gentle, not boastful, painting pictures of foreign markets and crowded docks. The boy listens, wide-eyed, the same way villagers listen to bedtime tales of faraway kings. By midday, the ship nears a distant coastline. The faint outline of a port town emerges, masts clustered like a forest of wooden spears, smoke rising from chimneys. The captain adjusts the sails slightly, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He's done this 100 times before. The sea breeze carries a hint of land-damp earth and wood smoke. For sailors, that scent is a promise. Soon, they'll set foot on solid ground. Maybe drink fresh water, maybe sleep on something that doesn't sway beneath them. But for now, they work as always, hoisting sails, checking knots, and guiding the ship toward its destination. As evening falls, the crew gathers once more on deck. The young sailor pulls a small wooden whistle from his pocket, carved crudely on a previous voyage. He plays a simple, uneven tune. It's not perfect, but it blends with the seas, music, the waves, the creaks, the sigh of wind. A few men hum along. Under a sky blazing with stars, the ship moves steadily forward, carrying its small human stories across an endless, indifferent ocean. The sea doesn't remember their names. But tomorrow, another sailor will hum another tune, another ship will trace another wake. And the rhythm of work on the open water will continue, just as it always has. If the sea feels wide and restless, the farm feels steady-rooted to the earth, turning quietly with the seasons. In the 1700s, most ordinary people earned their bread from this rhythm. Farming wasn't a job so much as a way of life. The land set the pace, and families followed its cues like clockwork. Picture a patchwork of fields rolling toward the horizon. Fences are crooked, paths are worn smooth by bare feet, and a thatched farmhouse sits low against the sky. In spring, the fields wake first. The soil, dark and rich, has thawed from winter's grip. Farmers walk the edges, testing its softness with the tips of their boots. They speak in low voices planning, remembering which furrow grew barley best last year, which corner might need new seed. Spring is sowing season. Men, women, and children all join in. A father scatters grain from a burlap sack in wide arcs, his movements practiced and sure. A mother follows, raking soil over the seeds. A child trails behind, barefoot and curious, stopping now and then to examine a beetle crawling across a leaf. The air smells of damp earth and possibility. By early summer, the fields are green with promise. Wheat sways gently, whispering to itself. The farm hums with chores, repairing fences, tending animals, watching the skies for signs of storms. Evenings bring soft light and the clink of simple suppers. Bread, cheese, maybe a bit of salted pork if times are good. There's humor here, too. A goat escapes its pen and munches on the herb garden. A farmer mutters something under his breath that makes his wife laugh. A sudden summer shower sends everyone running for cover, shoes forgotten in the mud. These small, ordinary moments knit farm life together. Then comes the height of summer. The sun is hot, the work is heavy, and the farm pulses with activity. The family weeds tirelessly, drives off crows, and checks the barn roof for leaks before the next rain. Children chase each other between haystacks, their laughter cutting through the thick, warm air. Nights are noisy with crickets, frogs, and the low murmur of adult voices by the hearth. Harvest is the climax. It's a joyful, exhausting rush. Scythes sweep through golden fields, and wheat falls in whispering waves. Neighbors help neighbors, knowing the favor will be returned. Wagons creak under heavy loads and barns swell with grain. The rest is shared relief in these days, a feeling that another winter can be faced with full bellies and warm blankets. Autumn deepens, and the fields empty. Trees flame red and orange, leaves crunch underfoot. The air turns crisp, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke. Families press cider, salt pork, and dry beans for storage. Evenings grow longer and candles flicker against the gathering dark. The work doesn't stop there. Our fences to mend, tools to sharpen, and livestock to prepare for colder nights, but the frantic pace of harvest is past. Then winter comes quietly, like a wool blanket thrown over the land. Fields lie still beneath frost and snow. The farmyard is silent, except for the occasional low of a cow or the creak of an icy door hinge. Work turns inward, mending clothes, spinning wool, telling stories by the fire. Children trace patterns on frosty windows, while elders share tales of winters long ago, blizzards survived, of lean years endured, and of small kindnesses that made the difference. In these months, time feels slower. The farm exists in a kind of suspended breath, waiting for spring to stir again. Yet even in stillness, life goes on. Chickens still need feeding. The old plow in the corner waits patiently for its next season. The family gathers closer, bound by necessity and habit. There's a quiet dignity in this cycle. The land doesn't hurry, and neither do the people. They measure time not in minutes or hours, but in the turning of seasons, the first buds on trees, the golden haze of harvest, the silence of winter nights. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees. Inside, the fire pops gently, and the smell of bread lingers in the air. The day's work is done, and tomorrow's tasks can wait. This is the rhythm of farm life, steady, patient, and comforting, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. By the 1700s, many towns pulsed with quiet order. Behind the chatter of merchants and the clip-clop of hooves was a network of rules and relationships called guilds organizations that shaped who could bake bread, craft shoes, or hammer gold into delicate chains. To earn a living in such a world wasn't just about talent. It was about belonging. Imagine a narrow street lined with timbered buildings whose upper floors lean toward each other like old friends. Wooden signs hang over doorway symbols, instead of words for those who can read. A boot for the cobbler, a hammer and tongs for the smith, a tankard for the brewer. Ad Stevla, inside these shops, guild life quietly governs the work. Guilds acted like a mix of professional club, labor union, and quality control board. They decided who could open a shop, set fair prices, and made sure no one cheated customers by cutting corners. To outsiders, these rules might seem fussy, but to villagers, guilds offered stability proof that the bread would rise properly and the shoes wouldn't. Fall apart after a single rainstorm. For a young boy or, sometimes a girl hoping to learn a craft, the first step was apprenticeship. It usually began around age 12 or 13, when a family would approach a master craftsman. There might be a handshake, a small payment, and a few words before the child packed up and moved into the master's household. The apprenticeship could last 7 years or more. Life as an apprentice wasn't easy. Hours were long, the tasks humble, sweeping shavings from the floor, stoking the forge, fetching water. The master would teach skills slowly, sometimes sternly. And mistakes weren't fatal, but could earn a sharp word or a redo of the day's work. And yet, there was pride in those little victories, the first cleanly cut board, the first loaf of bread that rose perfectly. Evenings might be quieter. The apprentice sharing a simple meal with the master's family, listening to tales of old fairs or famous craftsmen. Maybe there'd be a laugh over a botched project. Remember the time the new boy burned the porridge in the stew? The apprentice would blush, but years later, he'd tell the same story with a grin. After years of work, an apprentice could become a journeyman worker free to travel and earn wages under different masters. This stage was part work, part adventure. Journeymen wandered from town to town, learning new techniques, seeing new places, and building their reputations. Some might sleep in barns or under tavern roofs, their few tools wrapped in cloth beside them. The roads between towns carried their own quiet stories, friendships forged on the road. Small rivalries, and the occasional lucky break when a master recognized real talent. Finally, for those who proved themselves, there was the chance to become a master. To do so, a journeyman would create a masterpiece, a single, perfect example of their craft to be judged by the guild. Imagine the tension. A carpenter presenting a flawlessly joined chair. A goldsmith offering a delicate brooch. A baker baking a loaf so even and fragrant it makes the elders smile. Passing that test meant permission to open one's own shop, hang a sign, and take on apprentices of their own. Guild halls themselves were gathering places, sturdy, timbered buildings where members met to discuss rules, settle disputes, or host feasts on holy days. By candlelight, after the day's work was done, the hall might echo with laughter, songs, and the clink of wooden mugs. Guild life wasn't just business, it was community. These systems weren't perfect. Guilds could be exclusive, sometimes resisting new ideas or outside workers. But they preserved skills through generations and gave families a measure of security in uncertain times. In a world without factories or employment contracts, a guild's approval could mean the difference between prosperity and hunger. As the evening bell rings again, picture a small workshop bathed in golden lamplight. A master shoemaker bends over his bench, fitting a sole to leather with steady hands. His apprentice sweeps the floor, humming a tune he learned from a journeyman who once passed through town. The smell of tanned leather and warm oil fills the room. Outside, the town sleeps. Inside, a centuries-old tradition hums quietly, on threads of skill and care stretching from one generation to the next. The village is stirring before dawn, but today feels different, more alive. It's market day, and for folks in the 1700s, that means more than buying and selling. It's the heartbeat of the week, a small celebration disguised as business. Picture the village square slowly filling, farmers leading carts piled with vegetables still damp with morning dew. A fisherman setting out barrels of salted herring, a brewer hauling casks that smell faintly of hops. The air is rich with scents fresh bread, cured meat, smoke from a nearby fire where someone is roasting chestnuts. Here money is scarce. Coins jingle in a few pockets, but most trade happens by barter. A woman might exchange a bundle of wool for a sack of grain. A carpenter trades a simple stool for a basket of eggs. Deals are quiet, friendly, and sometimes a little sly. This cheese is worth 2 loaves, surely. The bargaining isn't cutthroat. It's a game everyone knows how to play. Children dart between stalls, their laughter mixing with the chatter of adults. One boy stops to pet a tethered goat, giggling when it nibbles his sleeve. Nearby, a potter shows off his wares, stacking clay bowls with a flourish. Each bowl bears the slight wobble of a hand-thrown piece, imperfections that prove it was made by a human, not a machine. Market day is as much about news as it is about trade. Villagers swap stories of distant relatives, local mishaps, or travelers passing through with tales of far-off wars or distant ports. A sailor home on leave might spin a yarn about strange birds on a Caribbean island or a storm that nearly swallowed his ship whole. Listeners nod, half believing, half dreaming. The soundscape is gentle. The creak of wooden wheels, the low murmur of voices, the occasional squawk of a chicken that's none too happy about its fate. Somewhere, a fiddler plays a slow, lilting melody, and a few children start an impromptu dance in the dust. As the sun climbs, deals are sealed with handshakes or a shared mug of small beer. Neighbors linger long after their errands are done, just to savor the bustle. A baker might offer a warm heel of bread to a friend. A blacksmith might slip a repaired hinge back to a farmer, without asking payment yet. Trust is the invisible currency here, and it circulates freely. Around midday, the square is at its busiest. Bright cloths flap in the breeze, showing off weavers' work. A traveling peddler opens a trunk to reveal small wonders: a tin whistle, a scrap of lace, a polished stone from a river far away. Children crowd around, eyes wide, even if they can't afford a thing. By afternoon, the energy begins to fade. Barrels are lighter, baskets emptier. Farmers load their carts for the journey home. Few lingering trades are made. Take these apples for that length of rope. And then the square slowly empties. Dust settles where feet tramped all day. The fiddler plays one last tune, then packs away his bow. Evening brings quiet again. The village square looks almost deserted, but there's a lingering warmth in the air, a sense of connection renewed. Tomorrow, life will return to its ordinary pace. Tending fields, mending tools, spinning wool. But for tonight, people sit by their fires. Bellies a little fuller, hearts a little lighter. In a world without supermarkets or instant deliveries, market day is more than commerce, it's community. It's the place where hands shake, stories travel, and small kindnesses pass from one person to another, like a shared loaf of bread. In the quiet corners of the 1700s world, not every livelihood involved a bustling market or a roaring forge. Much of the work, the kind that kept families clothed, fed, and warm, happened right inside the home. These domestic crafts were the invisible threads binding the fabric of village life. Picture a small cottage on a cool evening. Smoke curls from the chimney, carrying the scent of wood and supper. Inside, the room glows with lamplight. A mother sits near the hearth, mending a shirt whose elbows have seen too many seasons. Her needle moves steadily, almost hypnotically, through the worn cloth. Each stitch is small, but together they make the difference between a garment that lasts another winter or one that frays into rags. In another cottage, a grandmother spins wool on a small wheel, her foot tapping a gentle rhythm. The yarn winds onto the spindle in even layers, ready to be woven into cloth or knitted into socks. Spinning isn't a grand affair at S, something done while chatting with a neighbor or humming an old tune. The soft whir of the wheel becomes part of the cottage's soundscape, as familiar as the crackle of the fire. Children are part of this work, too. A little girl sits cross-legged on the floor, braiding dried grasses into simple mats. Her older brother whittles a small wooden spoon, his tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he concentrates. These aren't chores in the modern sense, they're bits of quiet learning, small lessons about patience and usefulness. In many homes, women brewed small beer or cider in the corner of the kitchen, filling the air with the yeasty smell of fermentation. Barrels were lined up neatly against the wall, waiting for a neighbor to stop by and exchange a mug for some eggs or a few carrots. Soap making was another humble art, boiling fat and ashes until they transformed into something that kept hands and clothes clean. It was a smelly, smoky task, but one that kept the household running. Candles were another essential craft. Beeswax or tallow was melted down, wicks dipped again, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, a stack of candles would grow.
Ow.
On long winter nights, that dim light was precious. Every flicker represented hours of unseen labor. Sometimes domestic crafts blurred into small-scale industry. A family might raise silkworms, dye yarn, or make lace for sale at the market. These little enterprises rarely made anyone rich. They could mean the difference between just scraping by and having a little extra for a new pair of shoes or a treat at the fair. The atmosphere in these homes is peaceful, but purposeful. You can almost hear the low murmur of conversation. A father telling a story while carving a stool leg. A daughter asking her mother to check her knitting stitches. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, the work continues, not hurried, not glamorous, but steady and sure. In some regions, cottage industries grew into networks. A weaver might depend on a neighbor's spun yarn. A lacemaker might send her work with a traveling merchant. These connections bound communities together in quiet ways. While cities would eventually hum with factories and machines, in the 1700s the economy was still intimate, handmade, and close to home. As the fire dies lower, the mother ties off her thread, inspecting her neat repair. The grandmother pauses her spinning to stretch her back. The children yawn, their small projects forgotten for now. The room glows faintly, the candles standing like sentries against the dark. Tomorrow, the same tasks will begin again. Thread through fabric, wood against knife, hands against wool. There's a kind of comfort in knowing that these small, unseen labors built the world just as surely as battles or kings did. Domestic crafts didn't make headlines, but they made life livable. Outside, the night deepens. The wind sighs once more against the cottage walls. Inside, a single candle flickers as the family settles into sleep, their work quietly holding their world together. As dusk settles on the countryside, a warm glow spills from the windows of a timber-framed building beside the main road. A painted sign, perhaps bearing a stag or a tankard, swings gently in the evening breeze. This is the village inn and tavern, and in the 1700s, it is more than just a place for ale. It's a resting point, a gathering place, and sometimes a lifeline. Inside, the air is thick with the comforting smells of wood smoke, spice stew, and yeast. A long wooden table runs down the center of the room, its surface worn smooth by countless elbows and spilled drinks. The innkeeper, a round-faced man with kind eyes, wipes the counter with a rag that's seen better days. His wife ladles steaming soup into clay bowls, her movements practiced and unhurried. A weary traveler enters, stamping dust from his boots. He nods to the locals, who greet him with quiet curiosity but no fuss. In a world without trains or highways, the sight of someone from beyond the next village still carries a spark of wonder. Okay? The traveler sets down his small pack, grateful for the fire's warmth and the smell of bread baking somewhere in the back kitchen. Taverns like this serve as informal newsrooms. Farmers gather here after a long day to exchange word about the weather or a neighbor a sick cow. Merchants pause on their journeys to share tales of distant markets or strange customs in far-off ports. The stories grow taller with each retelling, but no one minds. The room hums with a low, steady rhythm. Laughter, the scrape of chairs, the occasional pop of a log in the hearth. In a corner, a fiddler draws a slow, soothing tune from his instrument. His bow moves lazily, the melody simple and sweet. A few villagers tap their feet in time, though no one bothers with a full dance tonight. This isn't a rowdy celebration. It's the gentle heartbeat of a community unwinding. Upstairs, the inn's modest rooms wait for travelers. A straw mattress, a wool blanket, and a wooden washstand are the only luxuries. But after days on the road or a rough night aboard a creaking ship, such a room feels like a small paradise. The traveler will sleep well tonight, the faint sounds of laughter below blending with the whisper of the wind outside. Taverns also play a quiet but important role in business. Deals are struck here over mugs of ale, whether it's the sale of a wagon load of hay or the promise of a future shipment of salt fish. Even the local blacksmith might stop by to negotiate a fair price for iron nails with a passing trader. These arrangements are sealed not with paperwork, but with handshakes and mutual trust. The atmosphere isn't always solemn. On some nights when the moon is bright and spirits are high, the room might fill with singing simple ballads about love, harvest, or the sea. A dog might doze under a bench, twitching in its sleep, while children, allowed to stay up late, giggle in a shadowed corner. Even disagreements here rarely turn ugly. The innkeeper is steady presence, and the knowledge that everyone depends on everyone else usually keeps tempers mild. As the evening wears on, the crowd thins. Farmers head home, their lanterns bobbing down dark lanes. The fiddler packs away his instrument, nodding to the innkeeper as he goes. The last few embers glow faintly in the hearth, and the tavern's laughter fades into the still night. Inns and taverns of the 1700s were simple places, but they kept communities connected to each other and to the wider world. They were way stations for news, places where strangers became friends, and where weary souls could rest for a few hours before the road called them again. Imagine lying in that small upstairs room, the mattress creaking beneath you, the wool blanket scratchy but warm. Below, the faint murmur of the innkeeper cleaning up drifts through the floorboards. Outside, the night is deep and quiet. Tomorrow will bring another day of travel, trade, and toil. But for tonight, in this little corner of the world, all is still. Morning light spills over the rooftops of a modest 18th century town. The streets are waking up, not with the thunder of carts or the rush of crowds, but with a gentle chorus of hawkers' cries and the low hum of vendors setting up their stalls. Picture a narrow lane lined with crooked timber houses. A woman in a plain wool dress pushes a barrow laden with fresh greens, their leaves still shining with dew. Her voice is steady and sing-song as she calls, "Cabbage and carrots, fresh from the garden." Her tone is not desperate, it's rhythmic, almost comforting, as familiar to the street as the tolling of the church bell. A few steps away, a boy of perhaps 12 balances a tray of bread rolls on his shoulder. The rolls are uneven but golden, their warm aroma drifting through the air. He pauses to offer one to a passing seamstress, and they exchange a quick smile. In these towns, most people know each other. Trade is often as much about trust and kindness as it is about coin. Down the lane, a knife grinder turns the handle of his sharpening wheel. Sparks flash briefly in the sunlight. He hums a slow tune as he works, letting the familiar rasp of stone on steel blend with the chatter of neighbors greeting one another. Nearby, a woman sells ribbons and thread from a small basket slung over her arm. The colors, soft blues, deep reds, earthy browns catch the eye even in the muted daylight. Street vendors are more than merchants. They're the town's heartbeat, the ones who carry news between households and pass along small stories. A fishmonger might tell of a storm downriver. A chimney sweep might whisper a bit of harmless gossip. These exchanges keep the community knitted together, thread by thread. The sounds of this scene are unhurried, a hawkeress voice rising and falling like a lullaby, a dog's lazy bark, the faint creak of a cart's wooden axle. Even the occasional haggle, 2 pennies for the lot, all feels more playful than tense. Mid-morning brings more movement. A traveling peddler arrives, his pack bristling with oddments. Tin whistles, polished stones, maybe a scrap of lace from a distant town. Children gather around him wide-eyed, even if they have nothing to spend. Just looking feels like adventure enough. Sometimes vendors trade instead of selling. A shoemaker might swap a repaired sole for a bag of apples. A brewer might exchange a jug of cider for fresh fish. Coins are convenient, but in many corners of the 1700s, barter remains the lifeblood of commerce. As noon approaches, the narrow street hums quietly, never frantic. A fiddler leans against a doorway, lazily plucking at his strings. It's not for money, but because music makes the day feel fuller. A few children chase around a stack of barrels, their laughter echoing between the walls. By afternoon, the vendors begin to pack up. The woman with the greens ties her barrow and starts the slow walk home. The boy with the bread delivers the last roll to an elderly man and pockets the single coin he earned. The knife grinder wipes his hands on a rag and folds his wheel, ready to move on to the next street tomorrow. Evening falls, and the street grows quiet again. But traces of the day remain. A faint smell of baked bread. A scrap of ribbon caught on a doorstep. The memory of voices calling out offers in friendly tones. For townsfolk, these vendors are part of life's rhythms, small reminders that even in an age of kings and battles, the world turns on simple exchanges between ordinary people. In the hush of twilight, a lone hawker's voice carries faintly from a distant lane, a soft final note to the day's melody. Somewhere a window opens, and someone listens for a moment, comforted by the familiar sound. Life in the 1700s was tied to the seasons in a way that's hard to imagine now. The calendar on the wall was in tea just for keeping track of dates. It was a map for survival. Every job, every meal, every quiet moment beside the hearth was shaped by the turning of the year. Imagine a small farmstead in early spring. The ground is damp, the air still crisp, and the first shoots of green push bravely through the soil. A farmer stoops to inspect them, his breath fogging in the morning air. This is the season of preparation, plowing fields, mending tools, and planting seeds. Neighbors might trade advice over a fence or lend a spare pair of hands for a day. The work is hopeful, almost gentle, the promise of growth whispered on every breeze. By summer, the pace quickens. The sun climbs higher, and days stretch long and bright. Fields of wheat ripple like golden seas. Shepherds guide their flocks to high pastures, and children chase each other between haystacks. Blacksmiths and coopers are busy too, repairing carts and barrels for the heavy work of harvest. The air hums with energy, the buzzing of bees in orchards, the creak of wooden wagons on dusty roads, the distant laughter of villagers cooling off by a stream. Autumn arrives with a different kind of bustle. The fields must be stripped of their bounty before frost claims it. Farmers cut wheat with steady strokes, while families gather apples, pears, and late berries. In barns, grains are threshed, and root cellars fill with potatoes and turnips. The evenings grow cooler, and the smell of wood smoke drifts over the village. Inside kitchens, women preserve fruit and vegetables, boiling jars of jam that will brighten winter tables. There's satisfaction in the air, a sense of completion as full larders signal another season survived. Then comes winter, the quiet season. Snow blankets the countryside, softening every edge. Outdoor work slows to a crawl. Fields lie sleeping, tools hang neatly in barns, and livestock huddle in warm stalls. Indoors, life contracts around the hearth. Women mend clothes by candlelight. Men carve wooden spoons or repair broken furniture. Children play simple games on the floor, their laughter softened by the thick walls of the cottage. The world outside may be cold and dark, but inside there's a snug, steady rhythm. Even trades beyond farming bowed to the seasons. Fishermen watched the tides and storms, sometimes staying ashore for weeks when winter seas grew too dangerous. Weavers and tailors worked long into winter evenings, their craft less constrained by weather. Merchants planned their routes around passable roads. Knowing that a swollen river or a muddy lane could delay a journey for days, the seasons didn't just shape work, they shaped lives. Births, weddings, and festivals often clustered around the quieter times, when hands weren't needed in the fields. Winter feasts brightened the darkest nights. Summer fairs marked the longest days. People learned to measure time not by clocks, but by the smell of cut hay. The first frost on the ground, the return of swallows to their nests. Standing in that world for a moment, you can feel its rhythm, a steady heartbeat tied to earth and sky. There's a kind of comfort in the predictability, even when it's hard.
Oh.
The farmer knows spring will come again. The blacksmith knows the harvest will need new tools next year. The spinner by the fire knows her yarn will be woven when the fields thaw. As evening falls on our imaginary village, a thin plume of smoke curls upward into a lavender sky. Somewhere a cow lows softly in its stall. A child presses her nose against a frost-fogged window, watching snowflakes tumble under the glow of a lantern. tomorrow the world will turn again. The seasons will guide the work, as they always have. In the 1700s, the path to earning a living didn't always begin with school books or college halls. For most young people, it started in a workshop, a barn, or a small back room behind a shop sign. This was the world of apprenticeships where hands learned before heads, and skill was passed from one generation to the next like a treasured story. Picture a boy of 12 or 13, nervously clutching a small bundle of clothes. He stands at the threshold of a carpenter's shop, the smell of fresh-cut wood and sawdust filling his nose. The master carpenter, a broad-shouldered man with gentle eyes, greets him not with ceremony, but with a nod and a simple phrase. "You will learn if you re-will him." From that day forward, the apprentice becomes part of the household. He eats at the master's table, sleeps in a small corner room, and follows the rhythms of the workshop. His tasks begin humbly, sweeping sawdust, fetching tools, keeping the fire burning hot enough for bending wood. But with each small chore, he absorbs the cadence of the craft, the weight of a plane, the angle of a chisel, the satisfying sound when a joint fits perfectly. Not all apprentices were boys, of course. In many homes, girls learned trades as seamstresses, weavers, or midwives. A young girl might sit beside an older woman, learning to spin thread or brew herbal remedies. Her hands would mimic her teacher's movements, stitch by stitch, braid by braid, until the motions became her own. Learning a trade wasn't just about earning a wage someday, it was about earning trust and reputation. A blacksmith's apprentice learned not only how to shape iron, but also how to greet a customer respectfully, and how to repair a wagon axle without grumbling about the mud on his boots. The master's reputation depended on the apprentice's diligence, and so character mattered as much as skill. The sounds of apprenticeship were simple and steady. The scrape of a plane across wood, the hiss of a hot iron plunged into water, the gentle hum of a spinning wheel. Lessons weren't given in formal lectures, but in passing remarks. "Mind your angle there. Watch the grain of the wood, that stitch is too loose. Let's tighten it." These words, spoken casually, carried lifetimes of knowledge. The days were long. Apprentices rose early, worked until dusk, and rarely complained. But there was a certain pride in the work, even for the youngest hands. The first time a boy smoothed a piece of wood to a perfect finish, or a girl's embroidery was praised for its neatness, it was like being entrusted with a secret. They weren't just learning tasks, they were inheriting a legacy. Apprenticeships often lasted 7 years or more. When the time came to finish, the young tradesperson might travel as a journeyman, offering their skills in nearby towns. They carry a small chest of tools and a letter of recommendation from their master, a passport into the working world. Journeymen might sleep in barns or tavern lofts, following the work wherever it led, gathering experience and stories along the way. Inns and taverns would sometimes buzz with these wandering craftsmen, comparing techniques or sharing tips on where a good job might be found. A journeyman carpenter might trade advice with a shoemaker over a mug of ale. These small conversations, happening in firelit corners, kept knowledge flowing across villages and counties. The apprenticeship system wove communities together. Masters invested years in training their apprentices, knowing that skilled hands strengthened the local economy. Apprentices, in turn, grew up steeped in the values of patience, precision, and honesty. A well-made chair, or a perfectly fitted horseshoe wasn't just a product, it was a quiet testament to generations of learning. As evening falls in our imagined village, the apprentice sweeps the shop one last time. He pauses to run his fingers over the smooth edge of a beam he helped plane earlier that day. Outside, the sun sets behind the hills, painting the sky in warm orange and lavender hues. Tomorrow, he'll rise again to the smell of sawdust and the sound of the master, a steady voice guiding him through another small step toward mastery. In the 1700s, work was rarely a lonely pursuit. Behind every cobbler or carpenter stood a network of neighbors, friends, and fellow craftsmen woven together by tradition and trust. At the heart of many towns, this web of connection took on a formal shape: the guild. Picture a modest guild hall on a narrow street, its wooden beams darkened by age. By day, it might look like any other building, but tonight lanterns flicker in its windows, casting warm light on the cobblestones. Inside, men and women gather around long tables, bakers in flour-dusted aprons, weavers with calloused fingers, blacksmiths with soot still smudged on their arms. They're here not just to talk business, but to keep their shared world in balance. Guilds were part trade association, part support system, part community council.
Ow.
They set standards for quality, no wobbly chairs or underbaked bread allowed. They agreed on fair prices so neighbors wouldn't undercut one another. And when misfortune struck a sick child, a broken cart, a fire in a workshop, the guild often stepped in with help. In a world without insurance or safety nets, this mattered more than words can say. Apprenticeship and guild life were deeply entwined. A young apprentice who had spent years learning the trade would eventually present a masterpiece, a single, carefully crafted work to prove their skill. If the guild approved, they became a master craftsman, free to open their own shop. The process was indeed about prestige so much as trust. The guild was vouching to the entire community that this person's work was worthy. Guild meetings weren't always serious affairs. After business was done, they often became small celebrations. Ale mugs would clink, and laughter would ripple through the room. Stories were shared, a baker recounting the time his dough rose so high it knocked a spoon off the shelf, or a tailor joking about a client who insisted on trousers so tight he could barely sit. These moments of humor weren't frivolous, they were the glue that held the community together. Guilds also played a role in local festivals and religious observances. During a feast day or a market fair, you might see a guild banner, a painted cloth showing a loaf of bread, or a pair of scissors fluttering above a procession. Children would dart alongside, proud to point out their father's trade. In this way, guilds reminded everyone that ordinary work was part of the town's story, as important as the church or the manor. Not every village had formal guilds, but even in small hamlets, the same spirit of cooperation thrived. Neighbors borrowed tools, shared harvests, or banded together to rebuild a roof after a storm. The bonds of community were as vital as the tools in a craftsman's hands. Imagine the sounds. A low hum of voices as decisions are made, the crackle of lanterns, the faint creak of wooden benches. Outside, the town sleeps beneath a canopy of stars, unaware of the quiet agreements being forged that will shape tomorrow's bread, boots, and barrels. The guild system wasn't perfect. It could be strict, even exclusionary. But at its heart, it reflected a world where work was personal, and where a handshake and a shared meal carried the weight of a signed contract. In an age before mass production and anonymous corporations, knowing who made your bread or mended your shoes wasn't a luxury, it was the only way things worked. As the meeting ends, the members drift into the night, their footsteps echoing on the stones. The lanterns are snuffed one by one until the guild hall stands dark and quiet. But inside, on the long table, a few crumbs of bread and the faint smell of ale remain a reminder of fellowship, trust, and the simple power of people looking out for one another. Beyond the villages and their quiet markets, another world unfolds: the long roads. Distant ports and unknown towns where traveling merchants made their living. In the 1700s, these wanderers connected sleepy hamlets to the wider world, bringing news, goods, and a touch of wonder to otherwise ordinary lives. Picture a merchant's cart at dawn, its canvas cover tied tight against the chill, the merchant coat pulled close. Boots dusty from yesterday, S. Miles checks the straps on his horse and hums a little tune to keep his spirits up. Ahead lies another day of winding lanes and curious faces. Behind him trail 100 small stories. The village where he traded tin cups for wool. The harbor town where he bartered salt for dried fish. The cottage where he shared a warm fire with strangers on a rainy night. Traveling merchants carried more than just goods. They brought distant places into local imagination. A ribbon dyed in a faraway port, a tin whistle forged in another country. A rumor about a king's new law. These were treasures as much as the spices or bolts of cloth tucked in the cart, as to a farmer's daughter who had never seen the sea. A merchant's tale of crashing waves and ship's lanterns might sound like magic. The roads they traveled weren't easy. Some were little more than rutted tracks, muddied by rain or blocked by fallen branches. A swollen river might delay a journey for days. The nights were often spent in drafty barns, with hay for a pillow and the comforting sound of animals shifting nearby. When luck was good, a roadside inn or a village tavern offered a hot meal and conversation. When it wasn't, the merchant might sleep under the stars, staring at constellations that looked the same in every county, Along the way, merchants became unwitting messengers. They carried news between towns who had a good harvest, who was looking for a mason, whether the distant war was drawing closer. In an age without newspapers on every doorstep, a merchant's passing word could be the only link to the outside world. At a village market, the merchant's arrival was an event. Children gathered to peek into the cart, eyes wide at the sight of bright buttons or small mirrors. Farmers leaned on their hoes, ready to trade grain or cheese for a rare treat. The merchant's voice was patient but cheerful as he explained the uses of a new tool or the story behind a piece of cloth. Each transaction was part business, part performance. Even their carts told stories, wheels scarred from long miles, canvas patched from rough weather, small charms tied to the reins for luck. A few merchants traveled in pairs or small groups for safety and company, sharing jokes and songs around campfires under the open sky.
Others
preferred solitude. Their only companions the steady plod of hooves and the occasional fox slipping across the path at twilight. By nightfall, after a long day of roads and chatter, the merchant might sit beside a flickering fire, warming his hands and thinking about home, wherever home happened to be. He might trace his route on a mental map. Tomorrow, past the river ford. By next week, maybe the port town again. The stars overhead offered no instructions, but their quiet constancy was enough. Traveling merchants were the threads tying distant places together. They reminded isolated villages that they weren't alone, that somewhere beyond the hills were other farms, other markets, other lives humming along in their own rhythms. Each trade, each story shared, was a tiny bridge across a wide world. As the night deepens in our imagined countryside, the merchant settles under his blanket beside the wagon. The horse shifts its weight, snorts softly, and lowers its head to sleep. The fire crackles low, sending a wisp of smoke toward a sky scattered with stars. Tomorrow, the road will call again, winding through unknown miles toward the next town that waits, quietly, for news and wonder. Down by the coast, life in the 1700s had its own rhythm of song sung by tides, nets, and weathered boats. Fishing villages dotted the shores like scattered pearls, small but vital communities where the sea gave and sometimes took away. Picture a little harbor just before sunrise. The sky is a pale gray blue, and a thin mist clings to the water. Wooden boats rock lazily, their hulls patched from years of hard use. Fishermen move quietly, loading nets and checking lines, their boots scuff against wet planks, their breath clouding in the cold dawn. The air is rich with the scent of salt, tar, and fish mix that feels like home to those who live here. A bell clangs faintly as a boat pulls away from the pier. The oars dip into the water in a steady rhythm, the sound soft but strong. Out beyond the harbor, the sea stretches endless and mysterious. The men row toward familiar fishing grounds, guided by memory, instinct, and the shifting winds. Back on shore, the village stirs. Women light fires and prepare barrels for salting the day's catch. Children gather driftwood or chase each other across the damp sand. A few boys linger at the pier, eyes fixed on the horizon, dreaming of the day they'll join the cruise. In these villages, fishing isn't just work, it's inheritance, passed from father to son, from neighbor to neighbor. The sea provides more than fish. Sailmakers stitch sturdy sails in small sheds, their needles flashing in the light. Rope makers twist hemp fibers into thick lines, their hands moving in practiced patterns. Cooperages, the workshops where barrels are made, ring with the sound of hammers tapping hoops into place. These coastal trades keep the village alive as surely as the boats themselves. Midday brings a hum of activity. A lookout spots the first boat returning, its sails billowing softly. Villagers gather at the pier, eager for news of the catch. The boat glides in, dripping and creaking, nets heavy with shimmering fish. Laughter and cheers ripple through the crowd as the men haul the catch ashore. Buckets clatter, and soon the fish are laid out, scaled and packed into barrels of salt. The work is fast but cheerful, every hand pitching in. By afternoon, the harbor smells of brine and fresh fish. A traveling merchant haggles for a barrel of herring, while a local baker trades loaves for a smaller catch. Children sneak a look at the shining fish, their eyes wide at the silver flashes. A fiddler plays a jaunty tune near a stack of crates, his music mixing with the cries of gulls circling overhead. Fishing is never without risk. Everyone here knows stories of storms that came too quickly, of boats that didn't return. On stormy nights, the village gathers close, candles flickering as families whisper prayers for the men still at sea. But on calm evenings, when the tide is gentle and the sky glows pink, the sea feels like a friend, a vast, steady provider. As the sun sinks, the village slows. Nets are mended by lantern light, the rough fibers rasping softly under calloused fingers. Children fall asleep to the sound of waves against the shore, a lullaby older than memory. Somewhere a fisherman carves a small wooden toy for his daughter, the shavings curling onto the table like tiny shells. These coastal villages may seem small on a map, but they are strongholds of resilience and care. Each salted fish, each neatly coiled rope, each patched sail tells the story of ordinary people shaping their lives against the edge of a great, unpredictable sea. Night deepens. The last boat is tied. The pier quiet again, except for the gentle lap of water and the distant cry of a gull settling in for the night. A single lantern flickers in a cottage window, a warm point of light against the vast darkness. Tomorrow, before dawn, the cycle will begin again. Nets cast, fish hauled, lives sustained just as they always have been. Every so often, the quiet rhythm of village life in the 1700s was interrupted by a burst of color and sound. The market fair. These fairs were more than places to trade goods. They were social lifelines. Brief moments when distant neighbors became friends, and the ordinary world felt just a little more magical. Imagine a meadow or dusty town square transformed overnight. Wooden stalls line the edges, bright banners flap in the wind. And the air is alive with scents: fresh bread, spiced cider, roasting meat. Farmers arrive with wagons piled high poles, sacks of grain. Wheels of cheese while townsfolk carry baskets filled with homespun cloth or handmade tools. Chickens cluck nervously in wicker cages, unaware that their day has been planned for them. The fair hums with chatter. A baker haggles with a shepherd over the price of butter. A blacksmith inspects a new hammerhead, nodding in approval. Children dart between legs, laughing, clutching small coins earned by chores. Somewhere, a merchant tells a dramatic story about storms on distant seas. Half-truths, perhaps, but no one really minds. And then there are the entertainers. These wanderers, jugglers, fiddlers, storytellers, and acrobats bring with them the thrill of the unexpected. A traveling musician plays a tune that makes even the most stoic farmer tap his foot. A fire eater draws gasps from the crowd, the flames reflecting wide eyes and open mouths. A storyteller gathers children on a blanket under a tree, spinning tales of dragons, faraway kings, and enchanted forests. Market fairs were also places of news and gossip. Rumors from neighboring towns traveled faster here than on any road. Someone might whisper about a distant war or a new tax. Someone else might mention a wedding planned between two rival families. For a few days, everyone's world felt bigger. The atmosphere wasn't all noise and bustle. There were gentle moments, too. An elderly woman buying a small pot of honey for her granddaughter. A young man nervously offering a ribbon to a girl he has admired for months, to old friends, sharing a mug of cider as they watch the crowd. As the sun arcs high, a small procession of entertainers marches through the square, their costumes bright against the dust. A juggler tosses wooden clubs with casual grace. A fiddler's melody skips along like a stream. Children follow, imitating the juggler with imaginary props. Even the livestock seem to pause, ears flicking to the music. Later, when shadows grow long, the fair glows with lantern light. A puppet show unfolds on a makeshift stage, the audience giggling softly at the simple jokes. A traveling peddler sells paper lanterns that flicker like tiny stars. Somewhere off to the side, a group of farmers discuss the weather for next season's crops, their voices low and steady. The fair is a place where both wonder and routine can exist side by side. Market fairs also served practical purposes. Young apprentices might seek work. Craftsmen might form new partnerships, and travelers might find guides for dangerous roads. For many, this was the only chance all year to see so many faces in one place. The fair reminded everyone that while their villages might feel isolated, they were part of a larger, interconnected world. As the night deepens, the crowd thins. Merchants pack their unsold goods. The entertainers share a quiet meal beside their wagon, their bright costumes now dulled by twilight. The meadow or square grows still, the ground marked only by wagon ruts and a few stray feathers. By tomorrow, the field will return to its usual calm, as though the fair had never been. But for those who were there, the memory will linger. The sound of laughter, the shimmer of lanterns, the smell of roasting meat, and the feeling that, for a little while, life was both simple and extraordinary. Life in the 1700s was full of hard work, but the seasons also brought their own celebrations and customs moments when ordinary folks paused, gathered, and reminded themselves that life was more than toil. These weren't grand festivals with glittering courts and royal banquets. They were humble, heartfelt, and deeply tied to the rhythm of the land. Picture a small village square at midwinter. Snow rests lightly on thatched roofs, and lanterns glow warm against the dark. Inside cottages, families prepare special meals, simple stews. Fresh bread, if flour is plentiful, may be a sweet treat saved for the occasion. Neighbors bring small gifts, a jar of honey, a bundle of dried herbs, or a carved wooden toy. The air smells of pine boughs, candle wax, and smoke curling from chimneys. In spring, when the first shoots of green push through the thawed soil, another kind of joy stirs. Villagers gather outdoors to mark the turning of the year. Children weave flower crowns. Musicians play cheerful tunes on fiddles or pipes. The blacksmith might set aside his hammer for a day to dance on the grass. The celebration isn't loud or extravagant. It's a quiet thanksgiving for another winter survived and a hopeful glance at the season ahead. Summer brought fairs, games, and long evenings under open skies. Farmers, relieved to see their crops thriving, might host small feasts. A traveling storyteller could appear, spinning tales as fireflies blinked in the warm air. The laughter of children mixed with the hum of crickets, and for a few hours, the weight of daily labor seemed lighter. Autumn's harvest festivals were especially important. After months of work, the fields were full and the barns well stocked. Villagers came together to share their bounty. Tables were laid with bread, cheese, roasted vegetables, and cider. Jokes and songs filled the air, and for a night or two, no one worried about the coming cold. Even the most reserved elders might tap a toe to the music or sing an old ballad remembered from their youth. Local customs varied from place to place. In one hamlet, neighbors might light bonfires on a hilltop to chase away bad luck. In another, they might carve simple charms into wooden posts to bless the fields. Some villages had dances that only locals knew, steps passed down like heirlooms. Others told specific stories at certain times of year, legends of heroes, spirits, or old kings who once walked the same ground. These celebrations weren't just about merrymaking. They were anchors in the year's flow, milestones that gave meaning to work and hardship. When the days felt long and the labor endless, people could look forward to a feast, a dance, or a shared song. Even small gestures, a ribbon tied to a tree branch for luck, a candle lit for the memory of a loved one, carried quiet significance. As evening falls in our imagined village, you can almost hear the distant sound of a fiddle and the soft shuffle of feet on packed earth. A circle of neighbors dances slowly, their movements unhurried, their faces lit by firelight. Children doze on blankets while the stars wheel overhead. The moment is fleeting, but its warmth lingers, proof that even in a world of routine and hard work, people found ways to celebrate life. By dawn, the fires burn low. The villagers return to their homes, tired but content. The fields and roads look unchanged, but in their hearts, they carry the comfort of shared joy. Tomorrow will bring chores, mending, and planning for winter, but tonight's laughter will echo quietly through the days to come. In the 1700s, the close of day was not marked by electric lights or factory whistles, but by the slow fading of natural light. As the sun slipped behind the hills, ordinary folks wrapped up their tasks and let the world grow quiet. Picture a small farmstead. The fields are dusky gold, the wheat stubble catching the last light. A farmer shoulders his rake, his boots heavy with soil, and heads toward the glow of a cottage window. Behind him, the land he has worked all day now rests beneath a sky thick with stars. In a nearby village, a blacksmith banks his forge, the embers dimming to soft red. The clang of hammer on anvil ceases, leaving only the chirp of crickets. A baker, sleeves rolled and apron dusted with flour, slides the last loaf from a wood-fired oven and sets it on a wooden table to cool. Its crust crackles faintly as it meets the cooler air. Inside, cottages, candles flicker. Families gather for supper, simple fare. A stew of root vegetables, perhaps bread with butter, maybe a wedge of cheese saved from market day. Conversation is unhurried, sometimes no words at all, just the shared comfort of familiar company. A mother mends a shirt by lamplight, while a child drifts off in a chair, the fabric warm against small fingers. The sounds of the village shift. A door latch clicks. A dog barks once, then settles. An owl hoots from a nearby tree. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of hearth fires into the crisp night air. In fishing towns, nets are coiled, and boats bob quietly against their moorings. On distant roads, a traveling merchant finds a place to sleep beneath the stars, his wagon creaking as it settles. This was the hour when the world felt smaller, safer. The darkness outside was vast, but the glow inside was enough. In these quiet moments, people might share a story or a song, nothing grand. Just a tune passed down or a tale retold for the 100th time. A father hums an old melody while sharpening a knife. A grandmother tells her grandchildren about a harvest long past. As night deepens, chores give way to rest. Beds are simple, straw mattresses, wool blankets, maybe a hot brick wrapped in cloth to warm cold feet. Through small windows, the stars are bright and endless. There are no clocks ticking loudly, no glowing screens only, the slow, steady beat of a world settling into sleep. Somewhere, a sailor lies in his hammock aboard a gently rocking ship, staring up at the rigging against the moonlit sky. A weaver puts aside her shuttle and closes her eyes, the day's rhythm still echoing faintly in her mind. A shepherd, wrapped in his cloak beneath the open sky, listens to the soft bleating of sheep and the distant rush of a stream. The quiet end of a workday wasn't just the absence of labor, it was a promise. It's a promise that tomorrow the sun would rise again, the fields would need tending, the forge would ring once more, and between now and then, there was peace. As you picture these scenes lanterned light on worn wooden tables, the sigh of wind through a half-opened shutter, imagine the stillness seeping in, gentle and complete. Even the busiest life, even the hardest work, had this pause at the end of the day. And so ends our quiet walk through the workdays of ordinary folk in the 1700s, the bakers kneading dough before dawn, the merchants on dusty roads, and the farmers resting under a starlit sky. Thank you for sharing this peaceful moment with Sleeping Historian. If tonight's journey brought you a sense of calm or helped you drift towards sleep, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so you can join us again for more gentle stories from history. Sweet dreams and good night.